And the last thing I want to talk about this week is the NFL, just a little bit, and just kind of overall where the picture is, where we stand here. First, let's talk about the Patriots. Obviously, they're playing the Bills tomorrow night. I don't anticipate that's going to go very well. And I talked last week about how I think the Minnesota game is really going to be kind of a litmus test for the New England Patriots, and they came up short. Now, they played well for the most part. They had a good game. The defense didn't play as well as they usually do, but they lost. And their main reason for losing is because they struggled in the red zone. They just did, right? So it's frustrating as a Patriots fan to continue to see, and again, it's another instance of people banging their head against the wall and expecting it to move. It's just not gonna. You keep throwing out a lackluster offense every year, and you're gonna get lackluster results. It's just how it goes in today's NFL. Yes, I know that 10 years ago, drafting a wide receiver late in the first round probably wasn't a great idea, but you've got all these young studs that are coming out of the draft now. The drafts are so much deeper than they used to be. They really, really are, especially at wide receiver, especially at tight end, especially at offensive line. These guys are coming out of college ready to contribute right away. There's very few ridiculous busts in the first round. Unfortunately, the only one that I can think of is N'Keal Harry, who the Patriots drafted. But nonetheless, it's one of those things where, the Patriots just cannot seem to put it all together. They won 10-3 when their offense didn't do anything all game. And then they give up 33 points the next game when their offense actually, is scoring a little bit. So, if they put it all together, they could be pretty good. But at the same time, they're about where I thought they'd be. I figured they'd hover around 500 this year, and that's exactly where they're at. Right now, they're 6-5, and we'll see what happens tomorrow. But other than the Patriots, who, again, they're about where I thought they'd be, not necessarily in the standings in the AFC East. I didn't think they'd be in last place, even though they're above 500, which is crazy to think. But, they're about record-wise where I thought that they would be. And right now, they're really one of the only teams that are right about where I thought that they would be, because the NFL this year, to me, does not make a lick of sense. Let's start with the Jets. I talked about Zach Wilson and the Jets a lot last week, so I'm not going to be super in-depth as to what's going on over there, other than Mike White is the man, and I do not see how he's not going to be starting for the rest of the year. But the Jets right now are 7-4, and they have already won about as many games as I figured they would win all season. I figured they'd be 6-11, 7-10 by the end of the season. I figured they'd take some kind of step forward, but they wouldn't put it all together. Especially with not really great quarterback play all year, they have shown out. And I do not understand how they are as good as they are. Because on defense, it's not like they suddenly have 18 Pro Bowlers on their team. They don't. It's not like their offensive struggles have suddenly just magically disappeared. They haven't. But that defense, even though on paper they're not the best unit, they have balled out all season. And you know what? Good for them. That's awesome. I don't see how that's happening. I mean, I know you drafted Sauce Gardner, who's been one of the best DBs in football. That's something I can point out. But I don't really know of any other individual that, people will say, oh, that guy being on defense and the way he's played this year has really, really made a huge difference. I don't see that. And I know that when you are the worst defensive team in football, one good DB is not going to turn it around for you. Ask the Falcons. All right? The poor Falcons, and I'll get into them in a minute, more in depth anyway. The poor Falcons, they don't really have any talent in their back, or in their not in the backfield, but in their secondary, other than AJ Terrell. And guess what? They're a below average defense, even though AJ Terrell, one of the best young corners in the game. He's fantastic. He hasn't played as well this year as he did last year or the year before, but hey, you know what? He's still fantastic. It's not like he's a below average DB or anything. So, I don't know what's going on with the Jets, but hey, you know what? good for the Jets. Even though I can't stand the Jets, I'm happy for them. It is really sad to see a team struggle for so long, so it's nice to see them winning for a change. Another team that I want to talk about is the Miami Dolphins. Now, I think we all kind of figured the Miami Dolphins would be pretty good. What I didn't anticipate is Tua Tagovailoa just suddenly being one of the best quarterbacks in football. Never even remotely saw that coming. Now, where I'm looking online and I'm seeing these creators and I'm seeing these journalists and they're doing these votes on, who would you take? Would you take Tua or would you take Joe Burrow? Would you take Tua or would you take Lamar Jackson? Would you take Tua or would you take this? And Tua wins most of the time. Like, if you were drafting young quarterbacks in football, I think that a lot... Now, I wouldn't do this, but a lot of people would say, Lamar or Joe Burrow at 1, and then Lamar or Joe Burrow at 2, and then Tua at 3. And some people would put Tua ahead of Joe Burrow at this point, which to me, I can't even wrap my brain around it. I really can't. Like, the fact that we have gone from Tua needs to be a backup quarterback last year to Tua is in the race for NFL MVP? I mean, incredible. Incredible. Now listen, the addition of Tyreek Hill has a lot to do with that. He has really been a dominant force. And if you've been on this channel for a while, you know that a long time ago, last year when Tyreek Hill was traded to the Dolphins, I made a video about it saying that he would not be worth the money. And I want to kind of clarify my position on that before I get people throwing it in my face, saying, you were wrong, he's great. Tyreek Hill is great, but he's 29. Okay? I think that if you're going to sign a guy to 4 or 5 years, when his main ability is pure, unadulterated, ridiculous speed, they call him the cheetah for a reason. Okay? If you're going to sign somebody for speed, you're really banking on his legs staying healthy. For Tyreek Hill, all it could take is one bad injury, and then he's in his 30s, and he could go downhill. Now, you know what? I hope I'm wrong. I really do. I hope he's one of the few guys in history, because he would be one of the few guys in history that will stay that blazingly fast, that healthy, and that consistent well into his 30s. I hope he does, because he is an exciting, fantastic player to watch, and he is always one play, one catch away from taking it to the house. On any given play, he can make 5 guys miss in your secondary and run right past 3 more. It does not matter. He is that fast. So I hope he stays healthy, and I hope that he ends up being worth the contract. But for me, I did think that this year and next year, he would be great. And you know what? If the Dolphins win a Super Bowl in these 2 years, then it was all worth it. But if they don't, and then he starts going downhill, then we would have to start looking and seeing if that contract was worth it. Does that all make sense to everybody? I hope it does. I can't hear you because this is a video. But the point is, that's my clarification. That's my position. I didn't think that he was going to be terrible this year. By no stretch did I think he was going to be terrible this year. I did think that Tua would struggle to get him the ball deep, but Tua has shown some improvement in that area, and he's been healthy for most of the year other than the concussion stuff, which I haven't really gone into on this channel, and I just think that we should all try and keep everybody safe and don't be stupid when it comes to players' brains, right? I figured we'd all be smarter than that at this point. But anyway, Tua is playing like an MVP right now. And you know who else is playing like an MVP? Another guy that I said last year were 2 mediocre quarterbacks that I would bench in a heartbeat in Jalen Hurts. The Philadelphia Eagles, bar none, are the best team in football right now as far as I'm concerned. And Jalen Hurts is another guy that's playing like an MVP. I don't know anymore. I really don't know. And we're just getting started. There's so many other things in the NFL that I have no idea what in the world's going on, okay? Number 1. What in the world is happening in Denver? Can anybody answer that question? Now, most people will say Russell Wilson is playing very poorly. And you know what? You're right. He is. He's not playing great. And, there's reports coming out that he's losing the locker room and that players are making fun of him and, chastising him and stuff for the way he leads. And, but as sad as it is to see Russell Wilson play this poorly, it's not like they had great quarterbacks the last few years either. So what is happening to where an offense that, again, granted, minus Noah Fant, right? How are you performing this poorly? You still have Jerry Jeudy. You still have Cortland Sutton. You still have KJ Hamler. Like, how are you this bad? I don't know. I genuinely, I have no clue. I have no idea how the Denver Broncos, with all the talent that they have on both sides of the ball, have just really played poorly. And this poorly. And you know what? I feel bad for their defense, man. Their defense, every time I see a Broncos game or I see the score at the end of the game, if I couldn't catch the game, they lose like 17-15 or 20-17 or 24-10. Like, it's just one of the, where the defense has played pretty well, if not great, and the Broncos offense can just do nothing, right? It's crazy. The Chargers, another team that I thought would make the playoffs. Now, they're a little bit easier to explain than the Broncos, right? I mean, they've had some injuries, and they're still reasonably good. They're still in the playoff hunt. I think they might actually, as of the time of this recording, still be in, the last spot to barely make it in the postseason. But, I thought that they would take a huge leap forward, and they're about where they were at last year. They're hovering around 500. Justin Herbert really didn't improve in the offseason. His weapons have been just as mediocre as they were before, and the defense is again the same as it was. It's still hemorrhaging, running. It's still hemorrhaging yards on the ground. They're still getting beat over the top sometimes. Derwin James is still one of the best safeties in football, but he can't do it all, at least not all by himself. So I don't understand what's happening in San Diego. What? That tells you my age, right? I'm still not getting used to this in LA. I might have even said it earlier. If I did, I apologize. But I have no idea what's going on with the Chargers. And another one that I was looking at the other day, the Atlanta Falcons. Anybody who knows me knows that I truly believed, not necessarily that they wouldn't win a game, but that they were capable of not winning any games. I really did. Because they not only didn't get better in the offseason, they got worse. They lost Foyesade Oluokun to the Jaguars, who was their best tackler. Deion Jones is another year older. A.J. Terrell is another year older. Grady Jarrett is another year older. And you lost Matt Ryan. You traded your franchise quarterback to the Colts because he was way too expensive and he was getting up there in age. And you didn't replace him with a quarterback in the draft. You drafted Desmond Ridder in the third or fourth or whatever round it was. He's clearly not ready to be a starter. So you went out and got Marcus Mariota, who's been a backup for 3 years. Now, I like Marcus Mariota. I think he's a solid quarterback. And you know what? He's having a pretty solid year, and I'm really happy for him. I think he has proven that he can be a solid starting quarterback and a good game manager in the NFL. And I'm happy for him. Because I like good football, and when somebody plays good football, I'm happy for them, regardless of who it is. But I really looked at the weapons that they had, and I was like, who the heck is he going to throw to? You got Kyle Pitts, but yeah, he had a good year, but he still can't catch. He's still not catching any touchdowns. I think he had one last year. He has 2 this year, and now he just had season-ending surgery, so he's going to end the year with like 350 yards and 2 touchdowns on the season. That's your 4th overall pick. That's your only real true dynamic weapon, other than Cordero Patterson, who, you know what? He's had a million injuries, and he's 32, and he's a running back. So how incredible do you think he's going to be year to year to year? You can't rely on that every year. That can't be your main weapon every year. It's never going to work consistently. You've got to get some juice on offense. And I'm pretty sure, unless I'm out of my mind, and I'm sure you guys will correct me in the comments if I am, pretty sure that even next year, Calvin Ridley's, I think he got traded at this point, right? Pretty sure. I think he got traded to Jacksonville, perhaps, if I remember correctly. So you're not even going to be able to look forward to that next year, a number one caliber wide receiver coming back from a suspension. So, and I know that doesn't have anything to do with their record this year, but the point being is they just don't have a lot of talent. They don't really have anything in their secondary. They don't have a ton of good players on defense. They don't have a really good offensive line. They don't have a good quarterback. They have a pretty good running back, but he's getting up there in age, and he's been dealing with injuries this year and in prior years. And yet they are right there in terms of playoffs and in terms of their division. And in the division that they're in, the fact that the Falcons are even close. How? What happened to the Saints? What happened to Baker Mayfield in the Carolina Panthers? They stink. They absolutely stink. And even worse, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Oh boy. Finally, after 12 years, it seems like the people who are saying Tom Brady's going to fall off a cliff have maybe been right. It took them 12 years to do it after they started saying it, but I mean, my goodness. I mean, what is happening in Tampa Bay? You've got all these weapons, and I mean all these weapons. Cameron Brate. You got 3 pretty solid running backs. You've got Gronk. You've got Mike Evans. You've got Chris Godwin. You've got all these weapons, and yet they can't score. Now, they don't have nearly as good an offensive line as they used to. And Tom Brady is getting up there in age. So the beatings are probably taking a toll on a certain level. And obviously with all the off-field stuff with Tom Brady in his personal life, it's hard to imagine that even he, the consummate professional for 20 plus years, is able to completely block that out of his mind at all times. It must be very difficult. I'm not saying he can't, because if anybody can, it's him, but it must be very difficult to deal with all that and still have to play football. But even with all that, how are the Bucs below 500? Think about this. The NFC East and the AFC East both have all their teams above 500. And yet, the Bucs and the Falcons are right there neck and neck in their division, and neither of them are above 500. They're both below 500. That whole division is below 500. Just wild to think about. Absolutely wild to think about. And then, maybe even crazier than all of this, is the New York Giants. The New York Giants have baffled me every week as to where the team that they have is basically the same as it has been for the last 3 years. Not really a lot of great weapons on offense other than Saquon Barkley. I would have said, maybe Kadarius Toney can develop a little bit if he can stay healthy, but they traded him to Kansas City, so you don't even have that working for you now. Their defense is just as mediocre as it's always been on paper, right? You lost your best defensive back in James Bradbury in the offseason. How are they as good as they are? I don't understand. You look on paper, you look at the statistics, they're not particularly that impressive. Their offensive line isn't that impressive. Their quarterback certainly isn't that impressive. Their defense is more impressive, but point being, there are so many things going on in the NFL right now that I just have no clue what's going on. I have no idea how it's happening. I don't understand why certain teams are as good or as bad as they are. But, man, it's just been a weird year. for the NFL. It's been a weird year in sports, and I love it.
Hey guys, me again. Thank you so much for watching one of my clips from the Lopes Goes Last podcast. These clips are so much fun to do. I absolutely love making them and I absolutely love doing them. And this podcast is my baby. So I really want this thing to grow and I really want it to succeed. So if you did like what you see, please subscribe. Also hit that bell notification so you never miss any one of my episodes or one of my clips like this one. And please do also like and share these videos with your friends and your family so that we can make this thing grow as fast as possible. And I wanted to thank you again so much. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video and have a great rest of your day.